Today I'm talking to Madelein Kritzinger. She's an occupational therapist, really with a passion to help people with disabilities or limitations to keep engaging in sport and fitness. And the work she's been doing is absolutely amazing. She's also a CrossFit coach, and she combines her knowledge to help people adapt to independence and to the best possible outcomes. And it was really a great discussion that we had. So I'm here today with Madelein Kritzinger, and I met her. We are actually in the same church, but I met her, really saw what she was doing on her Facebook page where she's working with adaptive athletes. And I invited her today to come and speak to us a little bit about what it is she's doing, because I was really intrigued with what she was doing, especially because I'm also in the field of neuroplasticity and NLP, and the way she uses that also to rehab her athletes, to really show them that if there is a limitation that they have, that they don't have to accept it, they can really work on improving what it is they have. So welcome, Madelein, and thanks for joining.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm really excited to be here today.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an awesome discussion, especially for folks out there that might have family members, right, that have disabled family members that they live with.
Yeah, I think I really always enjoy having a chat with people, because everyone knows someone with some form of limitation. If I can just think of my own family, I have people in my family and friends group with limitations, whether it's an amputation or being in a wheelchair, or even just some kind of pain condition, a chronic pain condition, that it causes you limitations, and that doesn't have to limit your life. And so it's always fascinating to hear all the different ways that people get connected, and how that actually connects back to me as well. So it's great to have a bigger platform to also reach more people. Thank you.
You're welcome. So how did you end up working with adaptive athletes? Because I know when I see what you are doing on, when you post like the testimonials and the stories on Facebook, it's the one thing that struck me every single time about what I see is I almost want to say the hope that you are actually doing your work with. Like the whole approach that you have with your clients speaks of hope and making sure that they can live a better life, that they probably don't even know that they can. So how did you end up in this whole space?
So it's actually a bit of a funny story. I started studying occupational therapy because I wanted to help people. I wasn't sure how I was going to help people, and I actually didn't know much about occupational therapy until I started studying it. And halfway through my first year, I read a novel. I'm a very avid reader. So I read a novel, and it sounds so silly, but a Daniel Steele novel, and I've read it about 5 times since because it's just so great. It's called Winner, if anyone wants to read it. But it's about a girl who does downslope ski racing, and she fell and her spinal cord was severed, and she was in a wheelchair. And just their little family journey of how she actually got back to skiing, but adaptive skiing.
Yeah.
And instead of working towards going to the Olympics, she went to the Paralympics. And that was just, when I read that story, I know it's a novel and I know it's fiction, but that was just exactly what I wanted to do. I've always been interested in sports, and I've always been interested in helping people reach goals, even if it sounds ridiculous. And so that story just got me into, this is exactly what I want to do. I want to help people with disabilities reach even sport and physical goals that they didn't think they can get. And but during our curriculum on varsity, in OT they don't discuss sport. It doesn't feature. It's with the physios, yes, but with OT they just don't discuss it at all. So it just kind of has to take a back seat. And during my conserve year, so we have to do 4 years of study and then 1 year of community service to work for a government hospital. and then you're on your own to work wherever you want to. And during my concert year, adaptive CrossFit started taking over on social media. And I've been doing CrossFit for a few years now. So when I saw that, I just knew this is exactly what I've been wanting to do all the time. So to connect occupational therapy, which is all about getting independent and functional in your daily life, into a CrossFit space, which is also being functional. It's functional fitness and still using your body in the most safe and effective way possible, and meeting the needs of adaptive athletes, people with any form of limitation, whether it's cognitive, mental, or physical, and having them also meet these spaces. And it was just the perfect combination for me. So that's actually how I started. So I just started on social media to see everything. And when I moved to Paul, I just kind of started figuring out how I can start doing this on my own, because obviously there's nowhere else in South Africa that does that. So
that's
like
true.
I could look for a job in that space. So I just started. I met some people. The one lady that I post a lot about on social media, she's actually in our church. So I just approached her and said, listen, this is what I do. Would you be interested? And it took about 3 months of convincing.
Oh, shame.
And convincing the family to also invest in this. And now she gets really upset if we have to miss a week.
Oh, that's amazing.
So that's basically how I started and why.
Yeah. And I'm sitting here wondering that, knowing from a I almost want to say regular, non-adaptive CrossFit space, that you even get people that walk in there that never thought they would do what they will be doing in a week's time. And I guess it might even be the same for the adaptive athletes, because they get there and they even do stuff that they thought they would have never done, even in a normal setting, whether their life was normal. So that, I think that's maybe the great part about that.
Yeah, and like you said, now even in a normal CrossFit class, we both coach CrossFit in normal classes as well. And even there, you see people reaching goals within a month. They walk in, they can't do a pull-up to save their lives, and a month later they can do 10 ring rows and maybe a jumping pull-up. And no, it's not reaching the ultimate goal yet, but it's a whole lot of steps closer. And it's the same for the adaptive athletes. Those goals look slightly different. They might walk in or roll in a wheelchair and really struggle with doing things like transferring from their wheelchair to bed or to a different chair or to a toilet. And a month later, after just doing a bunch of upper body strengthening in a CrossFit space, because it's not rehab, it's post-rehab, in that space, and suddenly they come, 1 week they just come there, rock up and tell you, listen, I need to show you something. And they do a few transfers by themselves. And that's great. I mean, that's what function is all about, and functional fitness is all about. It's something you need to actually do every day.
Right. What was your most memorable story of a client? Because I can just imagine, like with the clients that come in and say, oh, I have to show you something. What was your most memorable story of such an experience?
Yeah, so I think I will definitely have to use Amanda as my storyline again. She had a stroke 25 years ago. And she had initial rehab way back then, but nothing since. So what we also know now, 25 years later in our profession, is neuroplasticity is really a thing. But it takes time and it takes a lot of input. And if you only have 2 or 3 months of rehab after a stroke, you'll get very limited effects of that neuroplasticity and really getting through that rehab. I mean, we speak about 18 months of your ultimate recovery time after any brain injury. And if you only have 3 months, it's very limited that you'll actually get. So obviously we started and she could not walk by herself at all. She also really couldn't stand up from a chair without help. And if she fell, she couldn't get back up by herself. And the first week we started, and it was quite a struggle because any form of transfers, I have to help her. And but the second week, she told me that she actually fell at home and she couldn't get back up. So she fell during the night when she had to go to the bathroom.
Oh, wow.
And she couldn't get back up until her husband woke up the next morning that he could help her up.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, that's terrible. For anyone, it's really just humiliating. And so that day that's how I started training her in burpees, is to get back down on the floor and get back up. Even if it's a lot more steps than normal, it's still, you get back up. That's the basics of a burpee, is get on the floor and get up. So we trained that for about 2 or 3 weeks. And I remember she came to me the one morning and she told me, listen, so I fell again. And she was in the bathroom, so she was quite far from anything to hold on to. Everything was slippery and straight. And she just said, because we did a lot of crawling as well, which is very weak, but we did a lot of it. And she told me, but it's fine. I just got on all fours and crawled my way to the bed and got back up. And it took me about 10 or 20 minutes, but I got back up and I got into bed.
Wow.
And it's it sounds like a small achievement, but for someone who, for 25 years, every time she falls, she has to wait for someone to help her up. It's, a bit of a dignity boost if you can just get yourself back up.
I would think it's more than a dignity boost, right? It's literally like a whole life has changed. That's amazing. And how did she feel about it? Like, what was her experience in terms of the fact that she could accomplish that night?
Yeah, every time something like that happens, she comes to me and she'll take about 3 days of thanking me because there's just so much improvement.
Yeah.
She didn't think she'll ever be able to do something, and now everything's just kind of getting easier.
Yeah.
So her experience is definitely also of just having hope of doing something for herself. And even if it's small things, but she appreciates being able to do more than she thought she could.
And when I didn't realize, because I see the videos obviously on Facebook, but I thought she was a recent that she had recently had the stroke because of the improvements that she's making. So I mean, I didn't know it was so long ago that she had the stroke, which is actually even more amazing, the fact that she's making all of this progress, where she had a huge chunk of time in her life where she really was just like succumbed to what she could do at that point in time, which was pretty much nothing.
Yeah, and that's actually what makes me so excited about our brains and the new pathways we can form in our brains, because if you can make such progress 25 years later, it means imagine what you can achieve within a year, or within 2 years after that injury, when everything is still so fresh. So it's fascinating. I knew we would make progress, because any input is better than none. But I didn't expect so much progress to be made within a year.
Wow. And I remember I always tell people that we hear outside that they will always say, the computer, our minds is like a computer, right? They always have this like slogan, oh, your mind is like a computer and blah, blah, blah. But actually they're making computers to be like our minds. That's how powerful our minds are.
Yeah, definitely.
What is the biggest issue you would say face disability athletes or people with disability, and maybe just for the sake of the folks watching, when we speak about athletes in CrossFit terminology, any person is an athlete. Any person that walks through CrossFit's door is an athlete, and we treat them as an athlete. We don't differentiate between somebody that is at the World Champs versus a mom that just come from her home, had 3 kids and did nothing for 10 years. Everybody is an athlete. So if we talk about athletes, these are ordinary people living their lives every single day, just like you and I. What would you say is the biggest issue today facing people with disabilities?
So there are a few logistical challenges. So first of all, finances is usually a big challenge. The workforce is not equipped for people with disabilities. From an occupational therapy point of view, it's one of the biggest fields in OT is return to work and vocational rehab, because the workforce is not equipped for it. So people with disabilities, especially physical, don't get jobs, or there's very limited jobs available for them. And that's not even looking at people with cognitive disabilities. So finances is a big challenge. I can't claim what I do from medical aid. Wow. Even though I am a medical professional, this is not medically necessary anymore.
Wow.
So I can't charge it as a medical aid fees. But so that would mean that people have to pay out of their pockets.
Yeah.
The families have to support them. Otherwise, if they live off the SASSA disability grants, those grants are ridiculously little. You can barely survive off just the grants. So finances are a big challenge. Otherwise, transport is also sometimes a challenge. But luckily for lockdown, everyone got Zoom. And that makes the transport challenges much less. So lockdown was good to that.
Yeah, whole new life, right? People discovered online and the internet.
Yeah, everyone discovered the internet. So that challenge is a little bit easier to manage. But yeah, and then another challenge that I didn't think when I started that this would be a challenge. But what I've seen is that society really isolates people with disabilities. We're not geared. Everywhere you would see a disability sticker for parking, and then there's still a step to get onto the sidewalk.
Makes no sense.
Why is there disability? It makes no sense. So society is just not geared for people with disabilities. The workforce isn't geared for them. So they are isolated. And like we all know, if you tell yourself enough times that you can't walk, you won't be able to walk anymore. So if society tells you for long enough that you are not welcome and you cannot do anything, you start believing it. So I think besides finances and transport and being uncomfortable in social spaces and seeing other people working out and feeling inferior because you're in a wheelchair, I think the biggest challenge that I would say is a limited mindset. So a disability mindset. If you look at, and I don't know how many people have watched this new documentary that was released in August, Rising Phoenix. It was all about the Paralympic Games. And what struck me most about that documentary was that all of the people that they interviewed, or most of the people that they interviewed, there are a few exceptions, are people that were born with a disability. And they just decided from the time they were a baby, they just decided they're the same as everyone else. If my brother can ride bicycles, so can I. Even if it's a little different, we'll make a plan. And people who were active and then had an accident and are now disabled, physically limited, they also have a bit more drive to get better and get back into that space. But I just found that a lot of people, especially the older population, people with strokes, especially, they weren't really active beforehand. That's probably a big reason for the stroke was poor healthy choices and stress. So they were already not very active, and they just succumbed to a mindset of, oh, now I'm disabled, I can't do anything. And that is the biggest challenge. So they see there is something, but they just don't see how they can ever achieve that. And then they're just not interested in pushing themselves to get better.
Don't you think it's part of the mentality of people? There's this mindset in terms of people's health, right? It's like you get married, you have your kids are going to high school, then you become obese, that's normal. You get high blood pressure, that's normal. Now you're on blood pressure tablets. Now you have diabetes, that's normal. That's part of, because I hear so many times that even doctors will tell people, oh, that's part of you're getting old. It will be like that. And I so often think that people expect that they have this life path. They have to go through this because that's a sign of I am getting old, and it should be like that. That is so far from the truth.
Yes. Yes, no, definitely. It's this picture that we've been given as how life goes. And I don't really want to always just get back to CrossFit methodology, but it's just something that really works. It's the whole sickness, wellness, fitness continuum. The fitness creates that barrier to sickness. You first have to become well before you can become sick. And physically, it's the same thing. Mentally, it's the same thing. If you create your own story and your own expectations of getting old, we don't have to get hypertension and diabetes and have a stroke at the age of 55 because you're overstressed and overworked. It doesn't have to be your story.
Right.
And if you were in an accident, one of my good friends was in an accident in the beginning of this year and has a very high spinal cord lesion. She is a physio. She doesn't have to decide that this is now the end of my life.
Right.
And she hasn't. Everywhere you'll see, she just says she will do it again. She will walk again. She will do all these things again. And it doesn't matter what anyone says.
Right.
If you decide your mindset is a fitness mindset, and it doesn't have to be a CrossFit fitness, it can be any form of fitness as long as you're busy. If that's your mindset, it'll take a very long time for you to accept that disability mindset.
Right. Yeah, that's amazing. The power of our minds is just mind-blowing, right? What we can actually do.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who would you say is your biggest influence? Who had the biggest influence on you?
I have many people who have really spoken into my life and who I look up to. And so the person that I would probably say is one of the people with the biggest influence is very much far removed from my fitness or work or anything.
Yeah.
He was my leader at church when I was still in Bloemfontein, Pastor Andre Lombard.
Oh, yeah.
So we did street ministry together as well. And he just, he's probably one of those people that you can just throw anything at him. And his first response will just be, how can I help you?
Yeah.
And then we'll figure out what happened to me and we'll sort it out later. This is so not important right now. How can I help you? And how can I make your life better today? And so he's definitely one of the people that's had the biggest influence in my life.
What would you say were the qualities and the characteristics of him that stood out for you that you knew or probably is still taking with you going forward in life?
I think it's just that never say die attitude. It's doesn't matter what we have in our hands, we'll figure it out. We'll get the best outcome that we are believing for, and everything else will fall into place. And he will just never say no. Unless it's really, I mean, there are limitations to anything, but if you ask him for any help, I can call him today and tell him, listen, Pastor, this is crucial. I am in big trouble. Something is really wrong. He'll be on the first plane to get down. And that's the kind of just loyalty and support and absolute love for people that he has. And I mean, if you look at street ministry and where he's come from and what they've accomplished, it's because he just really believes that this is evil and we are doing good and everything else doesn't matter. And so I think that's one of the big characteristics that
What was one of the worst things that you've seen in your years working in the street ministry? Because I know there is some stuff happening there that most people won't even comprehend. Most people don't even know it's going on out there.
So I think just for a quick moment of context, street ministry is a ministry in our church in Bloemfontein where we help people, or more specifically girls, but we've had everything, that are trapped in human trafficking. So in Bloemfontein is quite a hot spot because it's center of South Africa, and everything coming from Lesotho to the rest of the country, or Botswana, Namibia, everything first comes to Bloemfontein and is then distributed. So, and what we do is we go out once a week in teams of ladies and men, and the men are purely there for protection. And the girls, we reach out and talk to the girls that's working on the streets and really just give them hope and try and build a relationship, a trust relationship, so that when they realize that they can actually get out and have a better life, they know who to call. So just for context, that is street ministry. So I was there, I did street ministry for about 6 or 7 years, and I was in charge of the ladies and organizing everything for 2 or 3 of those 7 years. And we saw very, very challenging things on the streets. I think the age of the girls that we helped is probably something that is some of the worst stuff that we saw. Pastor Andre will also always tell you of fetching girls that's 8 or 9 or 10 years old and carrying them like a baby because they're so tiny. And I think, that's some of the stuff that's the most difficult to handle. I wasn't personally involved in the cases where they're like 10 years old. I think the youngest girl that I was involved with helping was 16.
Okay.
So it's still such a young little girl. Seeing what people do to other people with just no respect and no conscience. It just it opens your eyes to what is really going on in the world.
And 8, 9, 10 or 8, 9 and 10-year-old girls should really still be playing outside. They should just be little kids.
They should still be playing with mud. And building sandcastles.
It's true.
They should not be dealing with all the men.
And for the folks that don't know, when most of our experiences are formed in that first few years of childhood, like 0 to 9, even from the time that the baby is in the womb to 9, some scientists say it's 7 years, some say it's 12. That doesn't really matter. It's that first period of a child's life where everything they take in from the experiences and from the environment go and lies in the subconscious mind, because they don't have a analytical mind to reason things out like we have as adults and older children. And so that must really, at that point in time, because many people, I would hear people say that, well, but why? Obviously, with human trafficking, it's the child cannot just walk away. It's not that easy. But people would actually blame children for the fact that they've found themselves in that situation. But it is not that simple. It's not how it works.
Yeah, no, definitely not. And luckily, children are so resilient. They just, I think it's also because their analytical minds are just not as developed yet. So they still see the goodness and they still just see, okay, but it's done now, let's move on. And I think, and that's where adaptive anything can come into play. Children who have gone through trauma are very resilient, whether that is physical trauma or emotional trauma or any trauma. They're really resilient. So I think what I've also seen is children who have disabilities as children, they're also just so resilient. They just don't care. My friends are playing outside, I'm playing outside. They can climb on the monkey bars, I can do that. And that's a beautiful thing of a child's brain. Is they're just so resilient and they just learn so quickly. So, but getting through those mental challenges and the emotional trauma of whatever happened, it does lie in their subconscious. And if they deal with it well enough, it doesn't become a barrier to their success later in life. But obviously, it needs to be dealt with.
That's the other beauty of the whole thing around the neuroplasticity, that whether you're a child or an adult, or doesn't matter when something has happened to you, you hear many times people say that they now have to carry this with them for the rest of their life. I had a stroke, I am disabled, I now have to carry this for the rest of my life. And it's absolutely not true. You can absolutely work through that to have a completely new life.
It does not have to define who you are. And it does not have to define where you're going for the rest of your life. Things just change. I mean, I had a friend that always used to say that you're not a tree, you can be moved. And we are not trees, you can be moved. And your future is not set in stone, you can change it.
Absolutely.
Anything can change.
Absolutely.
Just adapt the way you do it.
Great. Madeleine, where can people get a hold of you? So just to reiterate for the people watching, if they have somebody that is disabled, they have a family member, and they want a better quality of life for that person, where can people get a hold of you?
So I am on Facebook and on Instagram, and I operate under the name Victory Adaptive Training. So I'm on Facebook and on Instagram, and they can contact me directly from there, or they can also send an email or call me. So my email address is victory@askme.co.za. And my telephone number is 082-82-82-311. So they can just contact me at any time. And it really, like we said earlier, lockdown has changed everything onto online. So there are no physical barriers. Anywhere in South Africa, they can reach me.
Wonderful. And we will also leave a link at the bottom in the description where you guys can get a hold of Madeleine. So that will also be there in the description. Thank you so much, Madeleine. It was really a privilege to learn a little bit about what you're doing. Thank you for the great work you're doing. I think if there's one message I hope that people will get today is that no matter where they are, they can certainly change where they want to go and who they end up being eventually.
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much for you, Petrolene. Thank you for having me and for really reaching out and giving me this platform to share as well. It really means a lot.
You're welcome. Bye.